My name is Anne. This is the story of the summer our lives changed forever. It began innocently enough, a family trip to visit our Aunt Fim in the countryside. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the lazy drone of cicadas. My little brother Mai skipped ahead, his laughter echoing through the rice paddies. He was only 7, his world filled with sunlight and laughter. Little did we know, a shadow had already fallen upon us. The first sign that something was wrong came as we approached Aunt Fim's village. Mai, usually so carefree, grew silent. His eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, turned dark and distant. He tugged at my mother's hand, his small voice tight with fear. "We shouldn't be here," he whispered. "It's not safe." We dismissed his worries as childish fancy. The village, nestled amongst emerald-green rice paddies, seemed peaceful enough. But as we drew closer, the air grew heavy, thick with an unseen pressure. The laughter died on my lips. We were being watched, I could feel it. Aunt Fim welcomed us with open arms and a worried frown. She had noticed the change in Mai, too. As we sat down to a dinner of fragrant rice and grilled fish, he refused to eat. His eyes darted around the room, his small body trembling. "The man with the burning eyes," he whimpered, "he's here." My parents exchanged worried glances. "What man, Mai?" my father asked gently. "There's no one here but us." But Mai only shook his head, his eyes wide with terror. "He's here for Mama," he whispered, burying his face in my mother's lap. The shadows seemed to deepen around us. The air grew cold, despite the summer heat. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. Later that night, with Mai finally asleep, Aunt Fim took my parents aside. Her voice was low, hushed as if she were sharing a dangerous secret. "Mai has always been different," she explained, her face etched with concern. "He remembers his past lives." My parents, both practical people, scoffed at this. Reincarnation? It seemed like a cruel joke. But Aunt Fim was insistent. "He speaks of things he cannot possibly know," she said, her voice trembling, "of people and places long gone, of a darkness that follows him." She told them of Mai's recurring nightmares, his chilling descriptions of a fiery underworld and a vengeful spirit, a spirit that had followed him from one life to the next. My parents listened, their faces pale. They loved their son, but this talk of past lives and vengeful spirits was too much to comprehend. They wanted to dismiss it as fantasy, but the fear in Aunt Fim's eyes, the terror in Mai's, was too real to ignore. The next day Mai refused to leave Aunt Fim's side. He clung to her, his small body racked with sobs. His words tumbled out in a torrent of fear and confusion. He spoke of a life lived in poverty, of a cruel master and a fiery death. He described a place of eternal torment, a hell where souls burned for their sins. He told us of the man with the burning eyes, a man he had wronged in a past life, a man who sought revenge, who followed him through the vale of death, seeking to claim his due. His descriptions were vivid, horrifying. He spoke of molten rivers and sulphurous skies, of tormented screams echoing through the darkness. His words painted a terrifying picture, a glimpse into a world beyond our understanding. We listened, our blood turning to ice. Was this the ramblings of a child's imagination or something more sinister, a window into the soul's journey through countless lives? As the days passed, Mai's visions grew stronger, more frequent. He would scream in the night, waking from nightmares drenched in sweat. He refused to be left alone, convinced that the man with the burning eyes was closing in. Then came the day when the nightmare spilled into our waking hours. We were walking back from the village market, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and purple. Suddenly Mai stiffened. He pointed a trembling finger towards a grove of bamboo trees, his face ashen. "He's there," he whispered. "He's watching us." We followed his gaze, our hearts pounding in our chests. At first we saw nothing, but then a flicker of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the darkness. It was the figure of a man, tall and gaunt, his features obscured by the fading light. He stood there for a moment, watching us with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Then, as quick as he had appeared, he was gone. Section 6. Seeking Solace, Finding Fear. We rushed back to Aunt Fim's house, our fear palpable. My parents, their faces pale with terror, finally acknowledged that something was terribly wrong. We huddled together that night, seeking comfort in each other's presence. But the fear was a living thing, a suffocating blanket that threatened to smother us. Desperate, my parents decided to seek help. Aunt Fim led us to a wizened old monk who lived in a remote temple high in the mountains. The journey was long and arduous, the air growing thinner and colder as we climbed. But the thought of the man with the burning eyes, of the terror that clung to my brother, spurred us onward. The temple, when we finally reached it, was a haven of peace and tranquility. Incense smoke curled in the air, filling our senses with the scent of sandalwood and lotus. But even here, surrounded by ancient wisdom and serenity, the fear lingered. For deep down we knew that some things cannot be outrun. Section 7. The Monk's Warning. The monk, a frail figure with eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 lifetimes, listened patiently to our story. He sat cross-legged on a silk cushion, his wrinkled face impassive. When we finished, a heavy silence descended upon the room. Finally he spoke, his voice soft but firm. "The boy is indeed burdened," he said, his gaze fixed on Mai, who cowered behind my mother. "He carries a heavy karmic debt." He confirmed our worst fears. The man with the burning eyes was real, a vengeful spirit bound to Mai by the chains of past transgressions. "He seeks retribution," the monk explained, his voice devoid of judgment. "A life for a life." We hung on his every word, our hearts heavy with dread. The monk offered no easy solutions, no magical charms to banish the vengeful spirit. He spoke of atonement, of facing the consequences of past actions. He gave Mai a small wooden amulet carved with protective symbols. It was a small comfort, a flicker of hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Section 8. A Haunting Realization. We returned from the temple, the monk's words echoing in our ears. The weight of Mai's past lives, of the vengeful spirit that haunted him, pressed down on us. We tried to resume our lives, to pretend that the world hadn't tilted on its axis, but the fear was a constant companion, a shadow that followed us everywhere. One evening as we sat down to dinner, I noticed my mother staring at me, her eyes filled with a chilling recognition. "The man with the burning eyes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've seen him before." She described a recurring dream, a nightmare that had plagued her since childhood. A nightmare of a burning house, a screaming child, and a man with eyes like hot coals. The realization hit us like a physical blow. The vengeful spirit, the man with the burning eyes, wasn't just haunting Mai, he was haunting our family, his reach extending across generations, drawing us all into his web of vengeance. Section 9. The Lingering Shadow. We left the village the next day, fleeing back to the city, but the fear followed us. It lingered in the shadows, whispered in the wind. Mai never fully recovered. He remained withdrawn, haunted by visions of the man with the burning eyes. And what of the vengeful spirit? Did he finally claim his due? Or does he still lurk in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike? The experience left us forever changed. We had glimpsed the darkness that lies beneath the surface of our world, the unseen forces that shape our destinies. We had learned that some sins can never be outrun, that some debts must be paid, even across the chasm of death. And we understood that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are not the ones that go bump in the night, but the ones that reside within our own hearts, born of our past actions, our deepest fears, and our darkest desires. The man with the burning eyes may be gone, but his shadow remains a chilling reminder that some stories never truly end. They linger in the silence, waiting to be told, to remind us that the line between the living and the dead, between reality and nightmare, is thinner